Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Intelli's Revenue Joint Interest Billing and AFE using Microsoft Excel and Power BI webinar. It's July 1st. It's July 4th week. We are all ready to have fun, red, white, and blue. We got barbecues and swimming pools coming up across America. So we're going to start your week off with some fun work. And then hopefully the rest of the day, you just give up and, Landman Friday all day, all week long. Enjoy yourself. But today, we're going to show a lot of information about revenue checks, oil and gas revenue checks, whether you're a working interest owner, a override owner, a royalty owner, a combination of all three of those type of owners. If you get money from an oil and gas operator, we're going to show and talk about how you can actually use Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Power BI to manage the information that you get from your payors at the end of the day. We're also going to talk about joint interest bills. So for the non-op working interest partners that are out there that actually pay bills on wells, you pay your percentages. Again, we're going to show you how you can manage it in Excel and Power BI, get some good insights and information as to what are in these 20, 30 page check stubs or 50-page joint interest bills that you get sent in the mail, or maybe you go download from EnergyLink. And at the end of the day, we're going to use authorizations for expenditure or AFEs. Everybody gets those in if you're the non-operated working interest partner. And we're going to combine all three of them together. We're going to look at how we make money. Are we spending money? What our budgets are? It's going to be a lot of fun. But my favorite part about what's going on today with Intellis, with Chris, with Kyle, is that we're actually going to show you how to do it. And you can get these tools. You're able to go out and get Power BI yourself. If you have a Microsoft 365 subscription, all it takes is for you to go out and upgrade to buy the Power BI Pro, $20 a month, and you have these tools at your fingertips. You already have Excel if you have 365, so that one's already included. $20, not much. You're talking about a Netflix subscription here, so we're not talking about something that you have to go out and spend tens of thousands of dollars on. And as you learn it and grow, you can custom design within Power BI and Excel. So a lot of fun stuff with that. When it comes down to who we are, I'll introduce myself. My name is Chris Pettigrew. I'm the owner of Intellis, one of the owners with Kyle, actually. And I've been around in the oil and gas business for my entire life. I've been doing it since I was a kid. My mother was in the business as a division order analyst, a lease analyst, and a jack of all trades as a contractor for many, many companies. I grew up doing all that stuff. And I met Kyle we go back to the Land Pro days. So for, maybe some of you old schools on here and remember the Land Pro land management system that was around. So Kyle, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Everybody meet Kyle Souza if you haven't already.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, I started when I was a teenager adminning databases for land administration for small upstream companies back with Land Pro. So I started out as a database admin, went from there, got my registered landman, became a landman, lease analyst, division order analyst, GIS analyst. I put all that together to focus not just on land, but on the tech side of land and really optimizing processes, improving analytics, that kind of thing. But with that land training, went through the U of H classes back when Terrell had those. And so, been around it now for a while. I'm no longer a teenager.
No longer a teenager. Yeah, that's right. So Kyle, we call Kyle the data wizard around here. A little bit of history about Kyle and myself is, as myself or my company, we were managing tens of thousands of oil and gas leases, tens of thousands of wells, tens of thousands of mineral ownership and tracts, and all, just large amounts of data in the early 2000s, late 90s, and even in 2010s, where here we are now in 2024. We would use lots of different programs that are out there, and I'm not going to name drop or put any names out there. I'm just going to call them the name brand systems. And one of the things that I always realized was we would export to Excel, and Kyle and I would get together and we would create the custom reports out of all of these different systems that we use. Usually because our clients or maybe ourselves internally, we needed these type of reports to be able to actually have insights into the system. So the systems themselves didn't have the ability to combine multiple reports together or combine multiple data sets together. So that's kind of how our journey began, and a lot of what you're going to see today. I want to get into a couple different things that you can do. I mean, we are talking about revenue checks. We are talking about joint interest bills. We are talking about AFEs today. For those of you that are out there, you know, we're going to let you know, go to Energy Link, go to JibLink. We do highly recommend using those services to download. You can get CDEX files. You can get Excel files that you can purchase directly from them. Honestly, you can hand key your checks and your jibs into Excel templates. Kyle's going to show some of that today. So you do not have to go out and buy the data. It's not completely the only way to go. I will tell you, it's pretty easy to do, and a lot of times very cost effective to do that. So I'm not sponsored by Inverus or Energy Link or anything like that. I'm just a person who, you know, if you get a $5 check and you spend $50 doing it, or maybe your time, it may not make a lot of sense to do that. So go ahead and pick up and get this data. Plus, it's already clean. It's already in a certain format. That helps out a lot when it comes down to transformation of data and loading data into things like Power BI and even or Excel. So for those of you out there, go to your Energy Link, go to Inverus. Your accounts are free. You get them if your operator is part of their subscription. Also, remember, not every operator or payer is part of the subscription. So you still may have things that are outside of the Energy Link world. If you do have that, they do have a service called Energy Scan that you can use, which will put everything into the Energy Link world. There's a price for that. I don't deal with the pricing. Again, I'm not affiliated with them. But we do know that you can get all of your data through Inverse and Energy Link in a format that really works well, that is consistent month after month. And that's about the transformation and the loading process. So any questions about that, please reach out to me and Kyle. You can also ask Q&A while you're on the webinar as well. Power BI training, man, there are a lot of places that you can go out and learn Power BI. I know LinkedIn has tons of posts that I've seen on there, YouTube videos like crazy. Same thing goes for Excel. If you're looking for free things, there is tons of stuff on YouTube. Lots of people doing different things. I mean, even using ChatGPT to talk about what you can do and maybe guiding you to certain places, using Google search. I use Coursera to learn Power BI. It does cost money. It was like $49 a month, but you get access to like all these different learning abilities. And I took an 8-week Power BI certification course to get certified through Microsoft Excel through Coursera. It's a pretty cool course. If you guys are ever interested in it, feel free to reach out to me on email. I'll send you the link. Kyle, what else do you have that you can do for training for Power BI and Excel?
Yeah, if you just Google dashboard in a day, there are some free one-day trainings that take 6 to 8 hours. You sit down, it's a live training with a group of people. Pragmatic Works puts it on. There's several Microsoft partners that put it on, and it's scheduled ahead of time. And that's a great place to start to figure out, is this something that I want to do? And am I ready technically to be able to carry it out?
For those of you out there who have great Excel experience, you're good at pivot tables, you're good at comparing data sets together in Excel, using Excel, I think you'll find Power BI to be, I like to call it Super Excel. It has a lot of the same functionality that Excel has, a lot of the same buttons, so it's not really hard to navigate and get around, but you are able to do a lot of number crunching. You're able to do combinations of data, and it doesn't freeze up whenever, Excel just gets too big. Too much data in Excel and you start to see the circle and you're sitting there waiting for things. So Excel does have its limitations, and Power BI allows you to do that. Kyle's going to show a little bit about that today. So getting started, we're going to get into revenue checks right now. What is an oil and gas revenue check? Well, it's your payday for what you and how you own, whether it may be minerals or an override or a working interest in a piece of property that has produced oil, gas, and products or minerals underneath the oil and gas lease and or joint operating agreement. And so it's your payday. It's your net revenue interest. Inside of your revenue checks, there are a lot of things to look at. You have, your well names. I've yet to see a revenue check that actually has the API number from the state on there, but sometimes I have seen that every once in a while if we're gracious enough to get it. Usually there's a property number on there, a well name. You're going to find the owner percentages, so your decimals will be on the checks. You have gross volumes and values. You also have nets, you have taxes, you have deductions. It shows you the price that things were sold at. And sometimes even it shows you the purchasers who actually purchased the oil and gas or products from the operator. So revenue checks come in all different sizes. Again, you can go out and get these already in Excel where they normalize the data for you. So, you're not keying in different revenue checks. So for those of you out there who may have revenue checks in a very large stance, if you go open up different PDFs and look at the checks that come in, you'll see they're in different, they look different. They're stacked different. They're coming out of different systems. And that's usually what it is. But you can always see a name brand check. Usually they'll be the same. So you can build templates around that. But the oil and gas revenue check is just the payday for you. It's a lot like your paycheck at the end of the day. It's what you get gross, you have your deductions, and what you get net, and all the details of why. So I'm going to pass it off to Kyle now to kind of work revenue checks and do what you came to see. So Kyle, you got the stage.
All right, I'm actually going to share my screen and we're going to look. This is an Enverus download. So this is what you get if you go buy an Excel spreadsheet of a revenue check from Enverus. And you can see it's got its operator data. This is what they get raw from the operator. Then it's got its energy link data because there's some stuff that you can go and add into energy link to normalize some stuff. And then map data is where it gets all put together. So we're going to focus on this map data tab. And like Chris said, there's lots of good information here. You can see, because it's Excel, your check amount, right? That's repeated on every single line, what the check amount is. So you can't just sum total that. It's going to come up to be way too high. But if we were to take a look over here, we've got all of our properties, all of our property names, all of our products, oil, natural gas. And if we get over to the owner value, now owner value, if we total that up, we can see in the bottom right-hand corner, 19,302. That's our gross owner value, owner net value, with 18,148. That totals what the check total is. So we can see that, but we can do some stuff here inside of Excel with this data. One thing you might want to see is you might want to see the breakdown by property. So if we come in here to Excel and we say, you know what, let's sort everything by our property name. And then I want to go over to my data tab and I could start doing some subtotals. At each change in property description is what they use for the property name. I want you to sum up my owner value. Gotta scroll through this little list, and owner net value. All right. And then Excel does some calculations and we can see, okay, how much did I make for a single well? Okay, that's great. Now, if you wanted to break it down by product instead of by property, you're going to have to take and you're going to have to basically undo what you just did here, remove all your subtotals, and now let's sort it by our product, sort A to Z, and then we'll subtotal that again. And this time we're going to, at each change in product code, we'll put in our subtotals. Okay, let's see. So we can see, all right, natural gas, oil, and residue gas. What we got? We can see oil's the big money maker here. So there's some sorting, there's some filtering that you can do. That's not super convenient though, right? Let's remove all that and get back to just our regular spreadsheet. Oh, little display issue with Excel. There we go, remove all. And we could do something like a pivot table. Now, I won't go get too much into pivot tables today. If you download your Excel spreadsheet from Enverus, it actually will include a pivot table here for you that has it broken down by property type, by product, by interest type, by product, by property. So you can see some pretty good information. But inside of Excel, your biggest limit is that you're limited to what's on the Excel spreadsheets. So if you're getting, a few checks a month, let's say 10 checks a month, and there's 12 months in a year, that's going to be 120 Excel spreadsheets. You're either going to have to do this same thing 120 times, or you're going to have to take and combine all that data into one big spreadsheet and then go through this process. And every time you get a new check, you add it to that spreadsheet and update it. And that's doable until you reach a certain amount of data. Excel will really start slowing down. You get 100,000 rows in there. You get 250,000. You might get some crashes once you start putting some pivot tables in there. The technical limit is a couple million rows, but the actual practical limit is much less than that. And this one check here for $18,000 is almost 1,200 rows, right? 1,161 rows of data. So the numbers can add up if you start getting checks from multiple operators month after month. And then that's where Power BI comes in. You guys ready to see some Power BI?
Do it.
All right. So let me just minimize that Excel spreadsheet. This is when you open Power BI, what you see. The blank screen, and inside this middle area is your visuals area. Or along the top, you have your menu. Over on the left-hand side, you have some navigation, so you can switch from visuals to your table view, to your relationships view or database model view. And then you have DAX, which DAX is a query language that we're not going to get into because this really is a low-code, no-code solution. And unless you're doing some advanced stuff, you don't need it. Over on the right-hand side, you can see filters that get set. You can see all the different visualizations that you can bring in, and then you get your data tree. Let's bring in some data from that Excel workbook that we were just looking at. So I'm just going to open that up here. It's connecting to it. And so I'm going to pick which sheet I want it to come from. Let's load it. And I'm anticipating an error here in just a minute. And I'm going to show you how to fix that error because it's a pretty common one. It has to do with a data type mismatch. In Excel, right, we've all seen usually a number field that has this little symbol, the yellow triangle with the exclamation mark in it. It tells us there's a problem. And in Excel, a lot of times it really doesn't hurt us that much. We can say, oh, well, yeah, it's number formatted as text, whatever. Well, Power BI, even though it's bringing data in from Excel, it really is a database application, and that kind of thing does matter. So we're going to come in here to view errors, and we're just going to tell it how to address that problem. And the cool thing is that you set these things up inside of Power BI, and then you don't have to keep fixing them every single time. If you keep using the same data source, it knows what to do every time. So we're going to see this operator CC has an error here. And the error is that it doesn't have the right type. So we're just going to tell it to, instead of treating it like a whole number, treat it like text. And it is going to fix that for us. If I come over here to partner CC, we can see the same thing. If I scroll down, we'd see the actual errors. Let me see if I can find them in here. All these are numbers, but here we go. We get an error. So if I click on the error, it'll tell us couldn't convert it to a whole number. Okay, that's fine. Well, it doesn't need to be a whole number. It's got some text in there or some special characters. And I'm just going to tell it, instead of treating it like a number, treat it like text. And then I can save and close that. And now it's going to reload that data and not give us any errors. Boom. So we're inside of here, and we want to start visualizing our data. I usually like to start with a table. Little table basically recreates a spreadsheet for me, and I'm just going to be dragging and dropping a lot of the data points onto my visuals. So I chose my data visual, and let's see here. What's some important stuff? Let's get our check number in there, and you can see how it starts building here inside my columns. I can also drag down there if I wanted. I can do my check date I can do my property description in there. And we start seeing some of the things that we need to start working on. Check number, that's coming across as a number, so it's trying to do some math there. Let's tell it, don't do any math. Don't summarize that. It took my date and it automatically broke it out into year, quarter, month, and day. Maybe I don't want it broken out. So I just want to change that to show me the check date. And there's all sorts of formatting options you can do there. Aside from check date, another important one is the production date, right? So I'm just going to drag and drop production date in there. Now we can get to some ones where we do want it to do some math. Let's get our owner value and our owner taxes. How about the owner deducts and the owner net value? All right, and if you were to pull out a calculator, you could do 19,302.91 minus the taxes of 908.04 minus the deducts of 245.93, and you will get your sum total of the owner net value, $18,148.94. It'd be nice if this showed as money though, right? So just so you know, you can go into your table view and you can do some formatting of things. You can come over here and you can call that owner value. We can select it and we can tell it this is a monetary value. My owner taxes are a monetary value. My owner deductions, I'm just going and I'm clicking each column and I'm setting it into a currency format by clicking on this $sign on my menu. And then it changes it. And then when I go back, we're going to see $signs. A little bit of a rounding issue. Okay, let's come back here and I'm just going to set it to only be 2 characters or 2 decimal places on each of these columns. This data comes raw from the operator out of their accounting system. A lot of times they're taking the owner's NRI and multiplying that by how much money the property made, and then they just export that. And in the background, you don't realize that's been carried out to the 8th or 10th or 12th decimal place. But here we go. We've got that, and we can see it just styled a little bit different. All right, that's fun. Maybe we want to start with filtering some of this stuff. So I'm just going to move this over here, and let's get a filter in there. So I'm going to add in what we call a slicer, and I like this one by production date. You can have this one where you drag and drop or go and click on a date. I also like this look where we have that date hierarchy where it's broken out into all the different quarters. All right, that's fun. Okay, great. That's pretty simple stuff. Nothing too crazy different from Excel. Let's take a look at some actual charts. So let's bring in a pie chart and let's see our revenue by product like we looked at. All right. So this one, I just clicked on my pie chart here. And I'm going to go pick my product code description from the legend. And then I'm going to use my owner value for my values. And now I can see that breakdown. And if I put my mouse over it, it pops up a little tooltip that tells me for oil, what is my sum of my owner value? And it gives me my legend here, right? I can see oil, natural gas, residue gas, and I can see 17.73K, which makes up almost 92% of my revenue. That owner value name is kind of messing with me. I don't really love that name, owner value, because I think of that as maybe the owner gross revenue. And this owner net value, I'm going to change to owner net revenue. So it just kind of make more sense inside my head. So it's real easy to just double click on a field, change the name, and you can see how everywhere that references it it also changes the name. We start seeing that owner gross revenue, it changed it on this chart. So you only have to change things in one place instead of Excel, where you may have to change things a bunch of different times. Let's get another pie chart in here and let's see what our interest is, or what our revenue is by interest type. How about that? So we have that owner gross revenue value. And let's look at it by interest type. Okay, I can see I'm very heavy on the royalties, a little bit of overrides, some working interest, but pretty heavy on the royalties. All right, great. Let's look at those deductions. Maybe break down those taxes a little bit. I'm going to use a different chart. This one's a donut chart, very similar to the pie chart, but it's got a hole in the middle because I'm missing something, missing that money I'm giving to the government. So I'm gonna come in here and let's see what are my fields. We've got the net deduct 1 is my value, and I'm sorry, I'm doing taxes here. Net tax 1 is my value, and tax type 1 here. Now I can see it is pretty much all going to severance taxes. Okay, not bad. Let's see another one. This time we'll do those deductions. So I'm just grabbing and dropping what are my net deducts. That's the part that's specific to me. And deduct type. And those are numeric codes. So the data from the operator has the deduction type 48, deduction type 10, deduction type 43. What do these mean? I would need to look at my revenue check and see. And this is where, if you're bringing in checks over time, checks from multiple operators, you can set up a little translation inside of Power BI where you say 43 means transportation. And that's from this operator. From another operator, it might just be coded as T. T means transportation. And then from a third operator, trans means transportation. And so you can set up this translation that all these things mean the same thing, and then you get to see them inside one chart. I like seeing stuff over time. That can be a big one. So let's take a look at something over time. Let's just bring in another chart. Gonna bring in a chart here, and let's see, I got my production month. Let's bring in my production month. I'll scroll through alphabetically here. Production month. I've got my owner gross revenue. You know what? I didn't mean to do a pie chart. I meant to do a bar graph here. So I'm just going to switch to my column chart, and it's a real easy change, right? It just changes everything for me. I want to see it by month, my sum of my owner gross. And you know what? Let's get fancy with it. Let's pull in our product here. And so now I can see on one check, I was paid for production from October, November, and December. I got money from 3 different products, and I get a little bit of a visualization of that product breakdown across 3 months, right? So that's a fun one. One thing is, this has gotten kind of crowded, right? So we can add in multiple pages inside one report. We don't have to bring our data back in or anything like that. We could just do a new page and start with some other visuals. Also, I don't know if we've gotten any Q&As. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them up into the Q&A portion. You'll see that on your controls for the webinar. All right. Let's see. You know what might be a fun one? Let's get kind of a detailed breakdown that maybe recreates that pivot table that we saw a little bit of. So I'm going to do what we call a matrix visual. It's very similar to a table, but it allows for multiple levels. And I'm going to make this nice and big to see. It's just drag and drop. How big do we want it? Let's get our property description in there. Within that property description, let's look at interest type. That's a good one to break it down by. maybe a column for each product. So it's a little bit more control than you might get inside of a regular pivot table. And then let's see the owner gross revenue. Yeah, let's also bring in our owner volume in there. So I can see, oh, you know what? I picked product code. I like the product description because that tells me a word instead of my code number. There we go. So I can see here the breakdown that I got paid royalties for the Adam West H23 blah 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 on natural gas, on oil, on residue gas, and what that sums to. And then I can see the volume of how much I got of each of those products. And then maybe let's scroll down. One of these I picked out ahead of time. We got the Dick Grayson W28P16. I can see I've got both an override there and a royalty interest in there, so I know that it's working correctly. It's showing me both those interests across all products, bringing it in. All right, so that's a little crash course on visualizing some revenue data here inside of Power BI. Trying to be time conscious, but any questions before we move on to the jibs?
So Kyle, let's do a real quick review over what you did for the revenue. Going to page 1. We loaded Excel data via the data loader, right? And this is not right now in a SQL database, but we do highly recommend for people who are dealing with larger amounts of data is to go ahead and probably move into SQL, which you can do Excel uploads into SQL and then make that your connector. So the Power BI does connect to SQL databases, but if you're small, if you're still able to navigate in Excel, you can load into Power BI and that becomes your sheet database at the end of the day. Kyle looked at data. He loaded data. He was able to change some things around, modify names, took owner value and made that into something called owner revenue. It made more sense to him at the end of the day. These are the type of things that we wanted to educate you guys on. You can make it a little more custom to what you want to see. We created an owner gross revenue chart. We were able to look at it by interest type, by product. We have a tax type and a deduct type. He did cover, the ability to name number 48 transportation, or whatever it may say inside that revenue check. Usually you can find at the top of the check, it has a little code on how to do that. I know those are things that in Excel you really can't do completely. So that allows you to, Power BI becomes a little more powerful for that. And then he elaborated on the fact that you can create more sheets. And so a lot of times when we're doing this, we're creating a summary sheet and a detail sheet, maybe a couple of summary sheets, depending on how many types of displays we want to show at a certain time, how many different things that may be inside of that page. One of the things I wanted you to show, Kyle, is the expansion of the data. So you can see you can roll up and down and scroll up and down, but there's a button you can click that will allow you to actually show the whole entire expanded source. So Kyle, if you want to click on that button next to the filter to open that up, there you go. And you can do this with anything you create in Power BI. I find this to be very helpful when I'm trying to see the bigger picture of things. Even though you may cram that data source into a smaller area of your actual dashboard, then you can expand upon that and then revert back to the report to go back into what you want to see. So using Power BI, not only to get visuals here, but also to delve into your data. You want to know what's going on in a certain reason. You want to, what well made what type of taxes were removed. Did you have a cost-free situation that may have came up and you're seeing deductions that are on here? Those are all the different types of pieces that you can build so far that Kyle has shown. So Kyle, I'll let you take it away and move into the jib stuff. You're going to see a lot more coming up here. So Kyle, you got the stage.
Sure, I'm going to add a new tab inside of Power BI, and I'm going to open up my jib spreadsheet so we can see here. This is the raw export from Enverus, and I can see, okay, I've got some of the same wells in here, a lot less data, right? Mostly a royalty owner, but got some working interest. So got some JIB data. The big thing I need to do here is I need to change some of these names. This amount cash call invoice, those repeating, that's not gonna go over well with them not being on the top row and having the same title multiple times or same name multiple times. So I'm just going to come in here and preface each of the columns with the word real quick. So a little bit of data prep to save some pain afterwards. Like Chris was saying, we do recommend moving stuff into SQL Server. Even if you aren't super big or don't have SQL Server already, you can get SQL Server Express, which is free and holds up to 10 gigabytes of data, which for a database is pretty substantial. That'd be a good amount of revenue checks. And then that way you have these table names set. You don't have to worry about them every time. So we get that done real quick. Delete our name. Let's save that worksheet and let's bring it in to Power BI. Just like to bring it right in here. All right, I want to do my accepted invoice details, load that. Now, one thing is, I know that I am getting jibbed on fewer properties than what I'm getting paid on, but how many fewer? I'm going to do what we call a card type visual. Going to bring in my card, and I'm going to scroll up to my accepted invoice details here. And I'm going to bring in my well name, which is called CC description. That's a terrible, just terrible way to label that. So let's just call that well name. I'm just going to change that name, make it easy. All right, well, that shows me my first one. I don't want to see my first one. I want to count how many there are. Great. So I know I'm dealing with 4 properties there. Which 4 properties? Again, we could bring in a table and I could just see my well names here. Okay, pretty simple. What is my invoice total? Again, I could do a card that brings that in. You don't have to always make tables. If you just wanted some sort of quick counter to just always see what are my invoices totaling, we could bring that in. So that is going to be our pending accepted invoiced. That's what they decided to name that. That's what happens when accountants name columns and spreadsheets. So no offense, I enjoy it. All right, let's see what else we got. Let's do a pretty fun pie chart. What's the big thing about JIBs that we want to see? We want to see where our money is going. So let's bring in a pie chart. I'm going to make this one a nice, decent size for us here because I think we're going to see a lot of stuff. Let's look. Let's sum up that amount that's due. And let's base it off of what we call our major description. All right. Enverus takes and groups the costs into a few different categories. And all these have been broken down into operating expense, surface downhole well, and and intangible. I can see intangible barely making the board there at 0.02. But I've got a lot of operating expenses. Well, what's the more detailed breakdown of that? Okay, I can do a very similar chart. And this time I'm going to bring in my minor description as my deciding factor. Now, before I even put my value on there, I can see there's a lot more minor descriptions than there are major descriptions. So I think this one is going to be pretty fun to look at. Okay, so there we go. And again, as you mouse over, it tells you your details. So maybe you have trouble telling the difference between 2 different purples. That's okay. Just mouse over it. This slice of pie is my saltwater disposal and landowner fees. This slice of pie is my artificial lift. This slice of pie is my labor. This slice of pie is my facilities compressor and turbines. Okay, that's all pretty basic. Here's a cool one that I like to add to it. You can add an extra dimension to this major description by breaking out the minor descriptions within it by adding them as my detail field in here. So now it's showing me not only is this an operating expense, but this specific operating expense is my saltwater disposal and landowner fees. This operating expense is my facilities compressor rental. This operating expense is my chemicals downhill. Maybe I want some more details in here. I can add to my tooltips field. Maybe I want to see, okay, this is all based off of my portion, but what is the uh, full amount being invoiced? Let's look at this. I'll put gross invoiced in there, and there is an actual note field called detail line notation. I'll put that in there also. So now when I mouse over my downhole well contractor drilling day work, I can see I'm being charged $2.94. So $3, not much. It's a small working interest out of the 22,000, and I can start seeing that detailed line. So I can say, okay, Acme truck line, great. For the surface facilities, it's being paid to KLX Energy Services LLC, Genco Energy Services, Logan Transportation. So I start seeing the data that's in that spreadsheet. And here's a fun one. If you go click on any of these visuals, it starts filtering the other visuals based on it. So if I want to see the cost specific to my Bruce Wayne 817A 4302H well, this is it. I'm looking at one well, only been invoiced this amount, and this is the breakdown of those costs. I could click on another well, see how those are breaking down. You can use control click and click on multiple things. So you can have two wells. Here's one thing that's interesting. I just saw everything on the left-hand side light up. It looks like all of the downhole and surface expenses are being billed to one well. Does that make sense to me? Like, is that something I'm expecting, or is this something that maybe I need to look into and ask some questions about? Why is one well bearing the burden of all those costs? This just giving me some ideas of questions to ask. Okay. So we've seen some JIB data, but one thing that I think is really cool, once you have both your JIB data and your revenue data inside of Power BI, something that is way easier to do in Power BI than it is in Excel, after all my years of experience, is some comparison of that data. So I'm going to set up a new tab here, and I'm going to compare that revenue data to my JIB data. I'm just going to start with a table. Like I said, I usually like to start with a nice little table. And I'm going to bring in my wells, right? And I'm going to see how much I'm being invoiced for those wells. Okay. And then I'm going to see how much I made off of those same wells. So we've got our owner revenue here. I'm going to bring that in. Look at that. That's not right. That's just the same number repeated over and over. Inside Power BI, I need to relate these things together. It's real simple to do. I come here to, where's my field? Property description, LMNOP. There we go. Gotta know my alphabet. Property description, I just left click and drag to well name, and it figures out how to do the relationship for me. A lot of times these settings are just great to go right off the bat, so I'm just going to hit save. That forms a relationship between the two. If I move this out, you can see we got a nice line connecting the two. And now when I go back to my visual, it is showing me specifically for each well how much I've been invoiced, how much my revenue is for that well. And now I can do something fun called a quick measure that I like to bring in. And I'm going to do a subtraction here. And I am going to bring in my total that I've made for that well. So owner revenue. And then I want to subtract how much I've been invoiced for that well. I'm just picking the fields, right? That's what I'm looking at. What is the field that I want to subtract from each other? And it takes care of all the filtering for me. And I can click add right here, and it's going to add that as a field. And now I can bring that over. Let me minimize that. And so now I can see what the difference is between those two. That's a terrible name. Let's call this one, we'll just call it profit. There we go. So I could see, yeah, 47.2 minus 4.12 would equal 43.08. So I could see all that. Now, the reason my total here on the revenue is showing the 19,000, because that's my original. It's totaling all the wells that you can't see in that grand total line. And there is a way to hide those totals. So there's, that's great. Let's do another quick measure. I'm going to do a division, and I'm going to pick for my numerator, what do we got? Let's pick the partner accepted invoice for my numerator, and for my denominator, I'm going to pick how much I've made. So on top, I want to see how much I've been billed. On bottom, I want to see how much I've earned. And then I'm going to add that in. And then I'm going to call it profit percent, because that's what I'm doing here. Actually, this would be my cost percent, is what that would be. So I can see my cost percent. Right now it's represented as a decimal. Let's make it a percentage just by clicking this little percent sign here. And now I can see which wells have pretty high costs associated with them. Based off of this, just one check and one invoice, but 27% of the money I spend on this well, or 27% of the money I make on this well, I'm spending back on it. 81% of the money here I make, I'm spending back on it. Maybe I want to highlight that, start seeing something, stand out, use the tools available to me to make this stand out. So just like in Excel, where you can apply conditional formatting, you can do that inside of Power BI. Let's see. Let's make this just red. Maybe nothing too bold. Let's see. Oh, did I not set that correctly? Greater than or equal to 50%, and let's see, less than 100%. Okay. So there we go. So now anything above a 50% cost factor is going to be highlighted for me. So yeah, there's some JIB versus revenue comparison.
So that's pretty amazing, Kyle. You took something straight out of Excel. You're able to key in all the JIB information, get an insight into what all your costs are. You're able to look at that. I mean, I've seen JIBs at $29 that are hundreds of pages long, and for me to do something like that would just be going through those pages and highlighting what I think is good. But to be able to actually compare that is amazing. And then being able to take your revenue versus your JIB, showing a profit or a loss, and you included a cost percentage factor with what we like to call red flags, although it's just a notification, and you can set that notification to come up for you automatically. So in this case, it was higher than 80% but less than, or higher than 50 but less than 100. If you want to adjust that, you can adjust that. This is where it's pointing things out to you. You're using your data to point things out to you. So that's some pretty cool stuff about what Power BI can do at the end of the day, is help you have insights into your data so you can choose to make decisions or not. Is this something that you're going to call your operator over right now. Maybe not. Maybe you want to trend this out over 3 months, 6 months. Maybe you want to look at it over a whole year and see what happens. Maybe you just want to know, and you're not going to make a phone call whatsoever because you don't want to do that, or you don't want to be the barking dog that's out there all the time, because you can get put at the bottom of the pile if you do that. So I'm going to pass it back to Kyle and let him do an AFE scenario, and then we have one more thing to show. Again, if you have any Q&A during any of this, feel free to reach out, fill it out in the Q&A. We'll try to answer any questions, or we'll save it for posts of the webinar and reach out to you directly. It's an open forum.
Yeah. So there's a little AFE spreadsheet. You're not going to get AFEs from Enverus, right? That data isn't recorded anywhere. They mail you or email you a letter with your election options. And so here we get our AFE, and it's been hand entered into this spreadsheet. So let's bring this spreadsheet in, minimize the other one, and let's start an AFE tab here, and let's go get data from, again, Excel workbook. Just going to bring that in. There's only one sheet in it. Nice and easy. All right, and so then we come here. Where's our AFE? Let me minimize these. All right, here we go. Here's our AFE. Let's start again just with the table. I like to do things. So we can bring in our AFE number. We can bring in the date for it. We can leave that in our columns if we wanted to. Oh, you know, I used the wrong AFE number column. There we go. Let's see, who's the operator for these? Let's see. What type of AFE is it? That one is important to me. AFE type. The actual well name, that'd be good to have on the spreadsheet. Yeah, so we start bringing in this information. We start seeing just a good view of our data, right? Owner percentage, owner portion, and we can get into how far things get rounded, all those kind of things. Like we talked about with the formatting, we won't redo all that. Maybe I want to see a nice little bar graph here of my data. I like this stacked column chart myself. And by well name, I want to see my owner portion is the dollar amount. Okay, well, one of these is a new drill. I can see that, the new well versus workovers. That's going to be way more expensive. So that's not going to help my visualization much. Let's come in and set up a slicer so that we can filter. That's what the slicers do. They let us filter. And you see these red lines, these are just guidelines. You don't have to use them. I just like to use them for sizing purposes. Let's do it by AFE type. And now I can see only my workovers. There we go. Now I've filtered everything just to the workovers so I can see those those bars are actually, you know, there like they're supposed to be. They're just kind of dwarfed by this big one here. Now, just like we compared the revenue and the JIB, we could compare the AFE and the JIB. Or you know what? I'm not even going to make a new tab. Let's just come over here to our existing tab and add some stuff. All right. So we could come in here and add in, oh, you know, we need to do our relationships again, right? So let's see, how did this relate it? It sensed that these should be related. Let's see how it did it. It found two columns that were both named well name, and it went ahead and related them. I'm going to switch it to both directions just because I like to work with that. In this scenario, it's a little bit more flexible. So Power BI built that relationship for me based off of common column names and seeing what I did the first time, basically. All right, let's bring in off of our accepted invoiced what that pending accepted invoiced amount is. So now I can see, oh, hey, look at this. I've been invoiced for some stuff that wasn't on the AFE. That's that top line. And then I have some stuff on the AFE that I haven't been invoiced for. So maybe instead of setting this up based on my well name for my AFE, I can use my well name from my jibs, and then I can start seeing that information just much clearer. Okay, so there's my AFE totals, my jib totals. All right, start bringing that information in. So depending on what you want to see, you get to be flexible. Maybe you want to pull one column from one table. You don't like how that looks, so you want to pull it from a different table. Here's another chart that I like that it's a type of card. It's called a multi-card. And what it does is it lets you see more than one just static, for lack of a better term, piece of info at a time. And so I'm going to pull this in here, and I'm going to add in the pending accepted invoiced and owner portion from my AFE, owner portion, and my well name here. And so I can see just what is my invoice total and what is my AFE total for each of these properties. And that's something that I could use as a quick double check just to see where I stand with things without doing any math. But like we did the calculated field before, we could do more calculated fields. It's real easy to do a quick measure. All right. And then you just tell it, okay, what do I want to do? Well, I need to subtract from my AFE where are you? Owner portion. There we go. And I want to subtract my jib totals from that. Oh, I had a little pop-up that I think messed up it trying to add real quick in there. Let's see. All right, here we go. Oh, no, it just added it twice up here. All right. And so then we can go to this table. Let's add that in. And now I can start seeing the difference between my AFEs and my jibs. All right. So that's a quick add of AFE data. Before we move to that last thing we wanted to show them, Chris, anything you want to say?
AFEs are something that you can't get data from anywhere. So like Kyle said, you can build up your own AFE spreadsheet. What you saw there was a template that we use here for AFEs. Feel free to create your own. And that's the cool part about Power BI is as long as you have your headers and your rows from Excel, you can create your own spreadsheets and move along with this. So this whole idea of this webinar today was to show you how you can do this on your own.
Now, you want to put some time into it. We have created this dashboard inside of Power BI. Chris, do you want to walk me through this, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Kyle. We'll step in and back and forth.
So this one is a nice yearly overview of data. So what I've done is I loaded in 6 months worth of revenue checks and jibs for the same properties we were just looking at. I loaded in 6 months worth of data, and we start to get to see some trends over time. And I can see what my price of oil is for Q1, Q2, what my average for the year is, my residue gas prices. I can start seeing the volumes that were produced in each quarter, how much money I made in each quarter, right? I can start seeing my price by product trending. Maybe I want to filter it to just one kind. If I look at oil, okay, there we go. I can see that it dipped down in February, but the price has been going up ever since. Maybe my volume for residue gas is really high. How's my prices for that? The price is going down. So I could see that I have a high volume, but with the price going down, maybe I'm expecting to make less money this quarter than last quarter off of it, even though the volume is getting bigger. So that's just a nice yearly summary. We have our revenue summary here. This breaks it down even further. So I can see, okay, what is my gross revenue for those wells before deductions? What well is making the most? I've got the Alfred Pennyworth 43B 31D making the most. My North Dark Knights are doing all right. The Bruce Wayne coming in here. Again, you just mouse over it and you see some info. Revenue by type like we saw, revenue by month like we saw. I've even got a little map in here, and I can click on one of these properties and it will change all my visuals based on the map that I'm looking at. So I can see that one's not necessarily a big moneymaker for me. All right, now that's all summarizing this data that we have on our revenue details. So this is basically recreating that revenue check. One thing that's really cool about these tables that I forgot to show you guys is you can take and you can export this data right to Excel from any of these visuals. And so if you wanted, I'm just going to save that and then I'll open that folder and open it. If you wanted to, you could find something that you had a question about or a problem with, or even something great that you want to share with somebody. You can filter to that inside of Power BI, and then you can export that to a spreadsheet and attach that to something to send somebody. And so this is a spreadsheet of that data out of Power BI. Now, what's another great use for this? Well, if I'm bringing in spreadsheet month after month after month into my database that's feeding Power BI, and then I set up a template for exporting out of that in the same format every time to do some report. So I don't have to go change every single spreadsheet. Power BI does that data normalization for me. All right, so let's minimize that. We have that revenue versus JIB comparison. We even have our nice top 10 wells. There's only 6 wells getting billed on here across the data, so the top 10s all look the same. But I can see very clearly who's costing me the most money, who's costing me the least money, right? What are my percentage profits over time? So, okay, looking at one bill and one revenue check, I had a really high cost ratio on one of those wells. But actually, over time, I have a pretty high profit ratio on them. So you got to view that data over time. We do get into our JIB details here, right? Our invoice by the major operating expense. We could see a little summary of our invoices and what the total is, summary of the wells and what their total is. I could see month by month what month is costing me the most money. Just like January was my highest revenue month because they're getting rid of all their, clearing the books for last year. February is my highest expense month. And that all comes from these details where I can, again, get into the details by invoice if I wanted to break it down by invoice, or by well if I wanted to break it down by well. And if I wanted to see my minor column instead of my major columns, that's all built into it. So I can see, okay, well, what goes into an operating expense? Oh, it's ad valorem taxes, it's artificial lift, it's chemicals, it's all those things. And I can see that breakdown by well or by invoice. Then we get to our AFE summary where I can see, okay, what all AFEs do I have? Here's my comparison. All right, I've been AFE'd 171,000, but I've only been jibbed $260. I should expect some upcoming bills. We get into that full comparison that we were building out there, but I can see my remaining budget. One thing is I could see that something's over budget. I'm in a negative percentage. I'm over budget on one of my properties. Is that something, like Chris was saying, worth asking questions about, or do I just go with it because it happens sometimes?
Yep.
These other tabs that we have, we're not going to get into today. Come back for our next webinar or set up a individual demo with us to see them.
Yeah, our next webinar will be covering volume sold, versus production. Bringing in some data from, we'll talk about our next webinar, but a data source that allows you to pull production information compared to volume sold, compared to your revenue, be able to evaluate that. For you guys to know, we have lots of different tabs on here. We have a division of interest tab, lease tracking. There's a map. You saw a map integration in the beginning of the revenue summary that you saw on that tab. We build out custom Power BI applications. We have some that are off the shelf that are already ready to go. But again, we wanted to show everybody that you can do this. Again, you get the 365, you pay 20 bucks a month, you learn a little bit about Power BI, you use Excel. It does a lot of data normalization for you. It does a lot of data comparisons that Excel just does not do at the end of the day. It even helps you write some scripts. So if you're writing some ifs or you're writing pivot table scripts, the Power BI will start to write scripts for you and help you understand that, so you don't have to be super powerful at all that. So we thank everybody for joining us today. Reach out, kyle.s@intellis.com, chris.p@intellis.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. Even if it's just you want to talk to us about what you're doing with your Power BI, you want to run a couple ideas. We're more than happy to have those conversations with people that are out there that are also taking this journey as we have already taken the journey and continue to take the journey. This is not it. I believe that this is something that's amazing. Very low cost. If you have the ability to do it, it's even more low cost. And even with us over here at Intellis, we're still pretty low cost. So, get an insight into your data, understand what's going on. I think that's the whole point here is don't just cash checks, don't just pay bills, don't just do what the operator tells you to do. Understand your business, understand what you own, understand the details of everything. And when you do that, knowledge is power. So thanks everybody for joining us today for the Intellis revenue, joint interest, bill, and authorization for expenditure webinar. Again, we're going to come up with it'll be the first Monday of every month. So the next one's volume, production, and a little bit of mapping to kind of show that out. And then we're going to keep these things going on how much we can add in here that you can actually create maybe your own systems at the end of the day. So thanks everybody for joining. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful week. Happy 4th of July.